Good evening, everybody. Can everyone hear me? At the back? Everyone hear me at the back? Awesome. Okay, so sorry I'm not your usual introductory person. One of the guys with the beards. They couldn't make it this evening, so they asked me to fill in for them. So just a couple of things, usual routine for those of you that have been here before. At the end of the talk, if you can just sort of clear out for 5-10 minutes whilst they set up the tables for the dinner service, and also just give them a bit of time before you put your dinner orders in, just to give them a chance to get ready. And then just also a thank you to Painted Dogs TV who are filming this evening so that it can be available for people who can't be here on YouTube. And I'm trying to remember, yes, also a big thank you to Thirsties for allowing us to host this here this evening, and to all of you for coming this evening. It's so good to see so many people coming out for our misunderstood nocturnal winged friends. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jane Burd, who's going to do the talk for us this evening. If I can just ask everybody as well, I'm sure lots of you have plenty of questions, but if we can just wait till the end, because Jane may probably go through a lot of your questions through the talk, and then anything afterwards we'll have a Q&A. Okay, so I'd like to welcome Jane. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. It's so great to see so many people that want to learn about bats, hopefully in a good way, and that most of you aren't here about the bats in your roof. Yeah, I know, that's why a lot of you are here. Right, just a little bit about myself, so you know who I am. I'm Jane Burd. I run a wildlife rehabilitation centre. We specialise in bats. We do also look after other little critters, birds, squirrels, hedgehogs, bush babies, all those kind of guys as well. But our speciality is the bats. We're also a conservation organisation as far as the bats go. We do educational talks like I'm doing here, as well as we help people that are having issues with bats in their roofs, and also a number of other conservation perspectives on bats. Just to give you an outline of what we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to give you some basics on bats. After that, I'll go through some of the common species that you'll find here, and then we'll go into a bit more detail on stuff that you didn't know about bats, and then we'll touch on the bats in the roofs. So those of you that are here for the bats in the roofs, we will get to you, don't worry. Okay. All right. So, just my background. Like I said, I'm in wildlife rehab. I've also got a BCom in accounts and economics. I started out rehabbing wildlife by accident. I had a pet cat, which brought all the wildlife home. And that's how I got involved. I started rehabbing wildlife before there were wildlife rehabilitation centres. And I then started volunteering at Free Me, which is a wildlife rehabilitation centre in Johannesburg, and that's where I got to meet the bats. And having worked with all sorts of different animals, the bats stole my heart. They are truly amazing, amazing animals, and I'm hoping to share that with you tonight. Okay, so, back one. That's a scientific name, Chiroptera. It means hand wing. And if you have a look there, you can see he's got a thumb and 4 fingers. The first 2 are fused, finger 3 and 4, and they are very similar to us anatomically. They're not flying rodents, so they're more closely related to you and I than rodents. So, the interesting thing with bats is they're very, very different from most other mammals their size. Small mammals breed fast, they have short lifespans. Bats are different. They've got a long lifespan. They're slow to reproduce, and sorry, next slide. And yeah, so here is sort of the biggest sort of separation in the bat species. We got fruit bats on one side, insectivorous bats on this side closest to me. The insectivorous bats obviously eat insects. There are a couple that eat a few other things. They're sometimes considered the microbats, the insect bats. They're smaller than the fruit bats, typically, not always. A couple of them eat things like frogs, other bats, and some of them are actually vampire bats, and they live exclusively on blood. And they're actually the only mammal to live exclusively on blood. We don't get any of those here, so don't worry. They're not as scary as vampires. They're more like overgrown mosquitoes. The fruit bats, they obviously eat fruit. There's also nectivorous bats in that category. They drink nectar. They're also responsible for things like tequila. They fertilize the agave plant, which is where our tequila comes from. No bats, no tequila. So that's a good reason to save bats. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just a little bit about bats. There are around about 1,400 species of bats. About a quarter of the mammals in the world are bats. They're also one of the least studied animals. We know very, very little about them. They're hard to study. They live in small little nooks and crannies here and there, the majority of them. And it's very hard for us to get close enough to actually study them, understand their behavior, and understand their needs. So these are the common guys that you will find in this area. This is the most common, is the free-tailed bat. If you have bats on your roof, it's likely to be this fella. There are several different species of free-tailed bats, and I'm not going to go into the differences because they're small differences. But typically they have big ears, wrinkled lips, and a sticky-out tail. The sticky-out tail is why they're called free-tailed bats. Bats, they are the only flying mammal. They're nocturnal. But although they're called hand wing by their scientific name Chiroptera, it's actually more like a flight suit. The wing is actually made of membrane that goes between elongated fingers, and it goes from the first finger all the way down the side of the bat to the ankle. And depending on the species of bat, it may or may not have a tail. If it has a tail, it'll either go partway on the tail, the membrane, or it'll go right to the tip of the tail, back to the other ankle, and round the other side. So more like a flight suit than actual wings. So that's our free-tailed guy. These guys have been studied far more in the United States than here. In the United States, they've got the largest aggregation of any mammal. It's the Mexican free-tailed bat in a place called Bracken Cave in Texas. And there they have between 15 and 20 million bats in that colony. It's massive. They can actually pick them up on satellite as they go out to hunt. So quite phenomenal. Those bats they've found can fly at a speed of 160 kilometers an hour. It's the fastest animal on Earth. Well, in the sky. It's faster than the peregrine falcon. The peregrine falcon does beat that in a dive, but we haven't managed to catch these guys in a dive, and they do dive after insects, and I suspect they will beat the peregrine in a dive as well. But as far as self-propelled flight goes, they beat everyone. They've also been found flying as high as 3 kilometers up. As far as bats go, they've got long, narrow wings, and that makes them super fast, but not as maneuverable. Other bat species have shorter, broader wings, and that gives them maneuverability. And those other bats are what you see flying around your garden. These guys you're not going to see flying around your garden. They're going to leave the roost, and they're going to go. And they're going to go high up in the sky. So if you see bats flying high up, it's likely to be this fella. They're also the guys you find in your roofs, typically here. And they do come in large colonies, and some colonies numbering over 1,000. And that is one of the issues that people have with them. It's not 1 or 2 bats in your roof. It can be a large number. Okay, next one. All right, this is the yellow-bellied house bat. Very pretty little fella. You can see he's got a yellow tummy in the second photograph, and he's got a fairly yellowish coat. These guys, if they are in your roof, you'll only have a couple of them. There'll be 5 or 6 of them, and you won't even know they're there. They belong to the family of bats called evening bats. They're plain-faced, they don't have all the wrinkles, their ears aren't quite as big, and their tail is enclosed in the membrane. So these guys, the membrane will go from the ankle to the end of the tail and back to the other ankle. Okay, next one. Same family of bats, also evening bats. These guys are smaller, and there are a lot of different species. Again, I'm not going to get into all the different types, but this is a Cape Serotine. This is a rusty pipistrelle, and the one on the end there is a bat called Schliefflin's twilight bat. And these little guys, great mozzie hunters. And all of our bats will catch mosquitoes if they're around, and they happen to see them, they will eat them. They're opportunists. They're not too fussy about exactly what they eat. If it's flying in front of them, they'll eat it. So, but these are the big mozzie eaters. They're really small bats, some of them weighing as little as 3 grams, which is the banana bat that we get here. He's a real tiny, tiny little fella. A teaspoon of water weighs 5 grams, and he weighs 3 grams. He's called a banana bat, not because he eats bananas, but he likes to roost in banana palms, in the filled up leaves in the middle. Very, very cute little fella, and in fact, bats are extremely intelligent. The banana bat has the largest brain surface area relative to its size, beating you and me. So they're very, very smart animals, and very social animals. Right, next one. So those are the pipistrelle bats. This is the Mauritian tomb bat. If he's roosting at your house, you'll find him under the eaves on the wall, and he'll just sit there out in the open and often duck backwards and forwards. In the wild, he roosts on tree trunks, especially things like marulas that don't have a lot of branches. Very, very pretty bat, probably our prettiest insectivorous bat. Okay, this is the Egyptian slit-faced bat. Got the most amazing ears, this bat. You'll find these guys flying low over the ground, and they use their ears to listen for insects. And they're quite interesting. When they mate, they hover in the air and mate, which is that must be quite a trick. So yeah, these are slow-flying bats, and they're lovely to watch because you'll watch them flying low around in the garden. The previous two, the pipistrelle and the yellow house bat, are the guys you see flying around the trees in your garden. Those are the guys you'll see flittering around. Okay. Right, and then the last one there, the epauletted fruit bat. These guys you'll see outside, hanging in the trees. That's where they roost. Sometimes they'll pick your veranda or under the eaves of your house. They are prone to making a bit of a mess because they eat fruit, and they eat a lot of it, and it comes out in a rather messy fashion. Yeah, they're called an epauletted fruit bat because on their shoulders here is a pouch that contains white hairs. And when they're calling, they'll actually unfill those pouches and the white hairs will stick out. And when they're not calling, those white hairs go back in. So those are the epaulets. That's where they get their name from. So that's the epauletted fruit bat. So that's enough pictures for now. Okay, one more slide. Okay, benefits and risks of bats. I think I'll address this first because this is the kind of thing people worry about. Often when I say bats, people say rabies. This is far more prevalent as far as New World bats go versus Old World bats. Our Old World bats actually don't get canine rabies. We don't know why, but they don't. America, their bats do get canine rabies. And to understand that in somewhere like America, you don't get dogs and cats getting rabies. Here we do. We live with the disease. Our bats in South Africa don't get canine rabies, but they actually get, some of them, can get a disease very similar. Rabies belongs to the family of diseases called lyssaviruses. For all intensive purposes, it's pretty much the same as rabies. It's just not called that. The insectivorous bats can get a lyssavirus called Diefenhager bat virus, and our fruit bats get one called Lagos bat virus. It is extremely, extremely rare. There's never been a human case of Lagos bat virus, which is the fruit bat one. The insectivorous bats, there's been about 2 cases ever in humans from the insectivorous bats. The free-tailed bats, the guys that live in your roof, we've never had a case in any one of them. We've never found any of the rabies type viruses in them. They're pretty safe. It's not to say it can't happen, but that's the story there. So, on that note, dogs and cats, dogs in particular, kill around 14 people a year with rabies. So that gives you a bit of a perspective. Bats have done in about 2 ever in southern Africa, whereas dogs are taking out around 14 a year in South Africa alone. So when people say to me rabies, I say dogs. It's not bats. Our bats are very, very low risk. Having said that, if you do find an injured or orphaned bat, pick it up with a soft cloth. Don't pick it up with your bare hands because it might bite you. And that goes for any wildlife. If you are bitten by any wildlife, you do need to see your medical practitioner. And that goes for domestic animals as well, unless it's your own and you know it's vaccinated. So that's just on the rabies side. Benefits of bats. The bats in the US save the US around about $3.7 billion a year in crop protection. As I said, they can pick them up on satellite coming out, and they go out and meet the corn moths. If it wasn't for the Mexican free-tailed bat in the US, they would not grow corn. It would be unaffordable. So they provide a huge, huge service. Probably our largest colony in South Africa is around about 300,000 bats. So it's very, very small in comparison to what they got in the US. It would be nice if we had more, ask the farmers. Because the problem with using pesticides is it's a bit like drug use. The more you use, the more you have to use. The insects become resistant. They have to spray the crops more and more. I've walked on some of the fruit farms and there is not a bird on the property. Why? They're spraying. They have to spray. The birds come and pick up all the dead insects, and that does the birds in. Bats, on the other hand, have helped a number of farmers get off pesticide. Because they're aerial feeders, they're not picking up insects off the ground. They will pick them up in flight, and the farmers can use less and less pesticide as the bats help control the insects. They've helped farmers go completely organic. So there's huge benefit in using them, and we can use them, and that's healthier for the environment, it's healthier for us. So there's a lot bats can actually do for us. They also pollinate a huge number of plants. They're responsible for most of the food on your plate. And whether it's bananas, mangoes, tequila, and as well as around about 80 medicines are dependent on bats pollinating certain plants. They're big pollinators and they're big seed dispersers. And most of our reforestation is through bats. So while we're chopping down trees, they're planting them. So that's some of the benefits and the risks. And there's things that come out like Ebola. And I actually got called in by a school. It was actually a yellow-bellied house bat like this guy. And it was a youngster and he got stuck in the classroom. So he was nesting, lying on top of one of the light fittings, trying to make himself as small and as unnoticeable as possible in front of this entire classroom of children and teachers. Anyway, the teacher spotted him, and she ran out with all the kids screaming Ebola. The story with bats and Ebola was all over the newspaper, and the truth comes out that after much testing and research, it appears that while they can pick up the virus, they mount an immune response. They do not shed the virus, they do not spread the virus. That doesn't end up in the newspaper. So they get blamed for a lot of stuff, and that's not been my experience. I've worked with thousands and thousands of bats, and I've never had one make me sick. And a lot of rehabbers around the world work with them. And they tout it as disease mongers, but I haven't seen it, and I don't see it in the field. So, all right. Okay, that's for the end. Then I'm going to just tell you about some bats. So, bats use language, very much like you and I do, and in a way that is very different from any other animal except humans. They use syntax. So, for instance, that's the difference between a glass on the table and a table on the glass. Their children learn language. They start out like our kids, they babble, they make syllables and repeat them excessively. And slowly they will learn language from their mother and from the rest of the colony. The mother will actually use motherese with the babies. What that is, you've all seen it. People talk to their dogs like that and their own children. Hello, my little one. That's motherese. Bats use motherese with their children. So they learn language, and they have to learn it. If you raise a baby bat without other bats, it doesn't have language. It needs to learn language from the adults. It learns both from its mother and the rest of the colony. Bats have different dialects. So bats from different areas, same species, they have different dialects. And if the mother has a different dialect to the rest of the colony, the bat will learn both, baby bat. The males sing, in a lot of the species, the males sing for their ladies, and also to tell other men to lay off. I'm checking out the chicks here. So what researchers have been able to put together of the songs, because believe it or not, researchers are able to pick up a little bit of what's happening in the conversations, and kind of put words to it. So it's a little bit, the songs kind of go along the lines of, hello, I'm a male bat, I live in this area and this is what it's like, and how about we chat? So that's, the rest they can't quite put it together, so there are probably a few pickup lines in there that the researchers haven't got. But yeah, so the boys sing for the girls, and then they get together. And bats have different ways of doing reproduction. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Our free tails do things very simply. They don't do any fun things like hovering in the air. They do their business in the roost. And the females get pregnant. They have a gestation period, depending on the species, anywhere between 2 and 3 months. And they pop out a baby. Other bats, on the other hand, will do things like hover in the air to mate, or go very high up and then mate during free fall, and better be finished before you hit the ground. That's a whole new Mile High club. And then some bats will actually store the sperm. They'll mate in sort of now, March, as we're going into winter, they'll mate. They'll store the sperm and self-fertilize in the spring when the food comes up and things are warmer and ready to have babies, and then they'll go through a gestation period and have a pup. Baby bats are called pups. Isn't that nice? They're sky puppies. Some other bats will get pregnant, start fetal development, and then stall it during the winter months, and then continue with the fetus developing as they go into spring. Bat mums are very good mums. They do dote on their babies. They'll even pick them up off the ground if they drop them, if they can. Some bats struggle to take off from the ground. So if a pup ends up on the ground, very often just picking that baby bat up, the mother will come and fetch it. If you do have an experience where you find a baby bat, please contact a wildlife rehabilitator so they can talk you through the process and also check that the bat is viable for mom to pick up, because sometimes they're very dehydrated, in which case it doesn't help them being picked up by mom. They have different ways of looking after their kids. The free-tail bats leave their kids in a big group, and all the kids hang out together, and mom goes and hangs out with her friends, and she pops in and feeds the kid every now and then. Other bats, baby will actually cling to mom while she flies. It'll stay with mom all the time when it's tiny, and it has to hang on. Literally, with its teeth and its claws, it hangs on for dear life while mom flies. And then when it gets a bit bigger, it will actually stay in the roost and wait for mom to come back. Learning to fly is quite a trick for bats. They are the only flying mammal, and there's probably a good reason for that. When baby bats start flying, their wing is only 80% of what it'll be as an adult, so they're already at a disadvantage. Many of them have to walk home. You can leave in flight and then walk home. And so flight is very, very challenging. Most of the babies will not reach maturity. They won't make it through their first year. There's about an 80% mortality rate. Most bats only have one baby a year. A couple of them, like some of our free-tails, will get pregnant 2 or 3 times because of a long summer and have 2 or 3 pups through the summer. Most of them will not survive. This is not like a rat. If you have a bunch of rats and you kill most of them, you can come back 2 months later and the numbers are right back up. Bats are not like that. You kill a lot of bats, you come back later, they're not there. It's going to take them years and years to recover. So when somebody kills a roost in their roof that numbers over 1,000, it's going to take a long time to replace those bats. So it's an animal we actually have to be very careful of. They've adapted to survive. Once they've got through their first year, they're pretty much set. It's going to be a long time before they have a problem. They've got a very, very high survival rate after that. But yeah, their reproduction is slow. Right, bats in roofs. Should we go there? Let me tell you a bit more about bats and then we'll go there. I'm watching the time. I'm very nervous of the time because I don't have a lot of time to talk to you tonight. So, right, so I'm just going to, sorry, I'm just checking my notes because I know there's a whole lot of stuff I'm wanting to cover and I'm worried I'm not going to get there. Male singing, okay. Yeah, okay. So, all right, let's do the bats in roofs. As most of you here know, bats in roofs is a very big problem, and understandably so, and I completely understand, because people phone me up and sort of, how do I kill the bats in my roof? And the answer is you don't. But I also understand that they are a problem. The free-tailed bats do have a scent about them, and you can actually tell the different species of free-tailed bats from how they smell. I can walk into somebody's house and they say, oh, I've got bats in the roof, and I'll say, oh, those are Angolan free-tails, or they're little free-tails, or they're Midas free-tails. So those are the problems with them, and getting bats out your roof is fairly straightforward. There are a few things that one has to watch out for. Firstly, they can't have babies when you're getting them out the roof. The babies are not flighted when they're born, so they can't fly, they're stuck in the roof. If one gets the adults out the roof and leaves the babies in the roof, then those babies are going to starve to death in your roof. They're also going to smell bad. So it's really not for your benefit and it's not for the bats' benefit. It's very important that the method that you use to get the bats out of your roof is a permanent method. Killing the bats in your roof is not a permanent method. They are in your roof because your roof is an appealing place for bats to live. It's a good home. So even if you kill the bats in your roof, you will get another colony moving in. So that's one of the big reasons not to kill them. There are other reasons, like it's illegal. Poisoning the bats in your roof is illegal. Committing acts of cruelty to animals. Our animals are protected under the Animal Protection Act, including bats, they're also protected. And starving babies to death and doing things like that is not acceptable. And I like to think with Rietspruit, you are conservation-minded people, so I do think you guys aren't into doing things the wrong way. So the use of poisons on bats is illegal. I still stand somewhere else. I'm squeaking. So the use of things like mothballs, Jay's fluid, chlorine, pesticides, fumitabs, and those are the common ones, are illegal, and smoke is illegal. You can't smoke the bats out your roof either. They're not bees. It does harm them like it harms us. So that's the first thing, is don't smoke them out, don't poison them out. It is very cruel, and unfortunately a number of pest control companies will actually advertise that they get bats out humanely. They just spray stuff in the roof and the bats fly away and they're fine. They're not fine. They come into rehab, some of them, the lucky ones. Most of them do not survive. They'll come in with seizures, confusion. The poisons have the same impact on the bats that it has on us. They flee the roof, absolutely, and understandably, but they're disorientated, they're confused, and it damages windpipe, lungs, etc., and causes horrible, horrible death. It really, really does. Let's get another one. This little lady here, her name's Easter. Why? Because she came in over Easter. She's a little free-tailed bat. She was fumigated in a roof. She's one of our few survivors of a fumigation. She came out during a fumigation, confused, disoriented, and flew into a wall. She's got an injured shoulder. The shoulder's a lot better now. She still has a bit of stiffness. I think she's a fairly elderly bat, but she's not right. She battles, her skin's not good, her digestive system's not good. She will never be released back into the wild. So when the pest controllers tell you, no, it's fine, we just spray some stuff in the roof, they fly away, they're fine. They're not fine. They're absolutely not fine. So, Okay, next one. Alrighty, this is pest control. These little guys, they were smoked out first, apparently. They were also sprayed with doom. This is a pest control company. The ones that didn't get out the roof were bludgeoned to death. And it's horrific. It's really horrific. But the sad thing is, people like you and me, well, not me, but people that don't know, will call a pest control company and say, do you get bats out of our roof humanely? They say, yeah, absolutely. This company that did this claimed to use the methods advocated by Bat Conservation International and the Gauteng Northern Bat Interest Group. None of them think that's a good idea. So on one hand, they advertise one thing, and they charged a fortune for it too, which is really sad. It doesn't cost a lot to buy a whole bunch of doom tins and bludgeon a few bats. And this was a big colony. It was probably close to 1,000 bats. And that's what happens. The pest controllers will tell you one thing. Unfortunately, a lot of them will do something else behind the scene. I spoke to the owner of the company, and he said to me, people won't pay to do a proper humane bat exclusion. I lose business, so that's why I do it. So it's really in our hands to do the right thing, because the pest controller's excuse is the people won't pay. Other pest controllers are doing this. It's cheap, it's easy. What do I do? If I don't do this as well, I lose money. So it's in our hands to change it. It's very much in our hands to change it. Sorry, these are horrible things, hey? Don't worry, I'll get back to the cute things about bats in a minute. This little guy here, he died trying to chew through that wire. This happens when people go and put wire or close up the holes after the bats have gone out flying. Not all bats fly at the same time. Not all bats fly every night. So some may very well still be in the roof, and the people will go and seal up the roof. This was done in our national parks. This is from Kruger. This was done during the breeding season, when there were babies in the roof. Not one chalet, many chalets. They did it at night, I'm pretty darn sure, because they trapped in a whole family of sparrows. Not in one chalet, in many of chalets. The bats, the birds, and really what I found very, very distressing is when they were contacted about it, they didn't say, good gosh, how did this happen? We'll investigate, this shouldn't happen. They said, we have a bat problem. As an organization, we approached Kruger and we offered our help. I've already been in once to Mapani camp to train their staff on how to do proper bat exclusions, because I know this happens. We offered our help again when this happened, and they said, no thank you, we know what we're doing. So if any of you happen to be in the Kruger National Park and see anything like this, see anything funny happening with bats or roofs, please take photographs, please take video, please contact us. As to how you get bats out and do it properly, let me just see the next video. Okay, we'll stay there, wait with that. Those are the cute guys. As to how you get bats out, what you do, make sure you're not in the breeding season, and here we really have 4 months to get them out in the Lowveld. It's June, July, August, September. By October, our females are in their last trimester. They're heavily pregnant, and they have to find the right roost to have their babies. And so we can't kick them out just then. So we only have 4 months here. June and July are tough months for the bats. It's our winter, there's not a lot of food around, and it's not the best time to throw them out. But because we only have 4 months, it's better than those horrible things happening to them. So what you do is, not during the breeding season, you seal up everywhere in the roof that a bat could get in and out, but isn't currently. And you can actually see on the walls, if they're getting in, up on the wall somewhere, in between, you'll actually see dirty marks where they're coming out, in and out. It's as they come out, their body's brushing against the wall, they'll leave a bit of a dirty mark on the wall, and you'll see bat guano on the floor, on where they're coming in and out. You can also watch at dusk. I'll stand here. You can also watch at dusk around the house, and you'll see where they're coming in and out. They typically leave at sundown, so if you take a glass of wine, sit outside, check out, you'll see where the bats are coming in and out your house. Seal up everywhere else that they could get in and out, and they aren't. You then put in what we call a one-way device for them. It's a piece of PVC pipe. You put it over the hole, make sure that it's got enough angle that they can't climb up it, and you then leave it in there for several nights. We recommend a minimum of 4 nights so that all the bats come out. Please check that the bats are coming out, and that allows them to come out and not get back in. Once all the bats are out, you've left it up for 4 nights at least, then seal it up. Make sure you don't do it during the cold winter months or the cold winter times. Here it's never really that cold, but if we're having a really cold spell, don't do it then, because that is a very difficult time for them. And that's really how easy it is to do a bat exclusion. Put bat houses up, both as a courtesy to the bats, since you're throwing them out the house, but also to try and prevent them from going, or discourage them from going and moving into your neighbor's house, because that's the other problem. Living with bats is actually very possible. A lot of people do live with free-tailed bats in their roof. If you can get used to the smell, which it's an animal smell. It's like if you have a water hole outside your bedroom window and the elephants frequent there, it's going to smell like elephants. Bats do smell like bats. It's not a terrible smell, but some people don't like it, other people don't mind. And we actually have a lot of people that allow the bats to live in their roof. It's actually quite cool because they get quite involved. They know how many bats are more or less in their colony. They're able to monitor the colony, and they are making a very big contribution to conservation, because protected roosts are one of the most important things for our bats. Because what happens typically with the bats is they get kicked out and they go from roof to roof to roof. Every time a portion of the colony is being lost, pups are being lost, females are aborting pups because they're heavily pregnant and they're stressed and they've got nowhere to stay. And this is happening again and again and again. I've got people that have told me about going up to put Think Pink in their roof insulation down and taking out 2 big black bags full of dead bats that the previous owner had killed. And unfortunately this is happening all the time, and it's unsustainable. These bats can't cope with it. They're not quick reproducers. The other problems with the bats are things like pesticide. Our farmers use a hell of a lot of pesticide, and we use a hell of a lot of pesticides. So please think twice before you spray insecticide on things, because what can happen is with the bats, if you're spraying insects with pesticide, poison is dose dependent. So if something's partially sprayed and it goes flying off, bats can very well be eating those insects, and a lot of the poisons are stored in the fat. Bats put on lots of fat before winter, and then they burn that through winter, and what happens is they start to slowly poison themselves through the winter. We very often get towards the end of winter bats that are battling with toxicity, and that's pesticide use. The big users of that are the farmers, but we can also watch what we're putting out in the environment. Wind turbines are another big problem for bats, also for our raptors. I can't call wind turbines green energy. Anything that's going to clout our biodiversity can't be green. It's causing a very big problem with the bats. Those blades, especially at the ends, are moving at a hell of a speed. That's taking out a lot of our raptors. The bats tend not to collide with them, but because of the change in air pressure, it gives them a lung embolism. And yeah, you can take a walk underneath wind turbines and you'll change your mind about whether that's green energy or not. So these are the things that are facing our bats. They've got a lot of challenges, and yeah, it's up to us to protect these animals and take them seriously. They are keystone species within the environment, and they really make a difference in the environment. If we don't have them, we're going to notice it on our plates. We're going to notice it in reforestation. it's not going to be a case of, well, there are no bats, well, that's a pity. We're going to notice that the pollination's not going to happen, and seed dispersal's not going to happen. We're going to have insect problems. We're going to need to use more pesticide. It's really, really going to make a difference to us. We're going to notice it. And the way we're going, bat numbers are dropping huge around the world. It's everywhere. And I'll say, since the COVID story, we have seen a significant decline in bats, as well as an increase in calls. Hello, I've got bats in my roof. Typically, we used to get in about between a dozen and 2 dozen little free-tailed bat pups every year that had, fallen out the roost, and we now get typically around about 3 a year. So that's a massive drop. We're talking about 80% less, and we need to take that very seriously. So, right, that's enough of a lecture of bats and roofs. If you want more details on how to get bats out of your roof, you can go to our Facebook page, ReWild, NPC. The NPC stands for Not-for-Profit Company. And on there, we've got a document. It's a 4-page document. We detail exactly how you get them out. You can always phone us. We also offer it as a service. We do come out and get them out for you, but you can also DIY it, which is cheaper, because obviously we do ask you to compensate us for fuel and labor, etc., because it is a job, it is work, but it's not that difficult. So we do have a document there that you can go through, and you can phone us. We'll help you over the phone and help you get the bats out humanely without the bats being injured. So it's not a case of we're complete bunny huggers and we think you should all live with bats on your roof. If you don't want to, there are ways to get them out. Cool. Right. So, yeah, that was all our monitoring, providing safe roosts. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to show you this video. It's very, very cute.
Is it on the slide?
Yeah. Can you press play? Does it work?
I can't see a play button anywhere. I
Oh.
can. Sorry, I'll try to
Oh,
find it.
okay. See if you can. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's fine. While you figure that out, I'll keep talking. Right. So, a little bit more about bats. Are we going to get a video? No. Okay. Bats are very loud, some of them. Some of them are actually quite quiet. If you remember at the beginning, we had the bat with the really long ears, the Egyptian slit face. We call that a whispering bat because its echolocation is so quiet. Bats echolocate. They send out sound, either through the mouth or the nose, and that sound bounces off objects, and from that they can read their environment as well as whether objects are moving, which direction, what speed. And interestingly, they've actually managed to get people to do basic echolocation. How interesting is that? Humans can actually do basic echolocation. So not as sophisticated as the bats, but they can actually use it to navigate. So very helpful for blind people. Bats, but some of our bats are very, very loud. A jet taking off at about 100 meters away is about 110 decibels. And bats can go up to around about, depending on who you're reading, between 140 and 160 decibels. It's seriously, seriously loud. It's louder than a rock concert. So, the day after a rock concert, for anyone who remembers, it was a long time ago for me, you're actually a bit deaf the next day. Your hearing is not as sensitive. Now, what bats do is they overexpress a gene that protects the hairs in the ear and the cells in the ear so that they don't lose their hearing. So they can hang out with everybody making a hell of a racket and they don't lose their hearing. Bats are hugely social, most of them. And getting back to a bit on the language, they can actually talk to each other like you and I do. They take turns talking. So the one bat will speak, the other bat will speak back, and then the other bat speaks back to that one, and they take turns in the conversation. But obviously it could get pretty loud in the roosts. They can also speak to another bat without having line of sight, and that bat knows who's being communicated to. So in a similar way as we use names. I can speak to somebody that's standing outside. I don't need to be looking at them. And they know I'm speaking to them because they have a name. Bats have a similar system. They can speak to a bat without line of sight, and that bat knows it's being spoken to. They do argue a lot, though, bats. They argue about who's sleeping where, who's eating what food. Bit like people, I suppose. They make friendships. Those friendships can last a lifetime, and most often do. Bats in a rehab situation sometimes end up making friends with a bat of a different species, and on release those bats will maintain that friendship. They'll learn not only different dialects, they'll learn the language of other bats and use it. So they have vocal learning, they can hear and then copy that sound, a bit like your parrot does. They don't speak human, they only speak bat. I've never heard one I've never heard one learn human, but they will communicate with us. It's really interesting when you do this rehab stuff, you got scientists on one side and then you got us fluffy people that are patching up broken bats. And I remember reading an article in the journals about bats, and they were covering how bats can actually learn the language of other bats. And this was a new discovery. And I thought they should have just asked. Because we see it in our clinics. Bats, different species use their particular call to ask for food. So when it gets close to feeding time, everyone's out shouting, "Feed me, feed me." And, and some of the bats sort of think, well, I think those Midas freetails are getting preference. And they'll start doing the call of the Midas freetail for food instead of their own call. So yeah, that just gives you a bit of an idea there. They'll also teach you things. They'll train you. I remember I put out a video ages ago on our Facebook channel, and what it showed was the little bats coming out and eating their food, and then I sent them back in and they all went back into their enclosure, and then I fed one of the a new bat that was very nervous, and while I was feeding the new bat, all the other bats were peering out of their enclosure waiting, because they knew I'd give them another one at the end. And as soon as I got to the end, I called them out. I said, "Come." And all of them ran out, had their last worm, and I said, "Right, go back in." And they all ran back in. And people said to me, "How do you train your bats?" And I said, "I don't. They train me, actually." I had a veterinarian once send me a bat that they'd got in, and she'd been looking after it for a couple of days. And, oh, here are these cute guys. Look at this. So these are some of our youngsters. They're little freetails. Now you couldn't do that with a wild bat straight out of the wild, but you can get an injured adult bat to come in and he'll behave like this. He'll come and learn from the others, and he'll eat like this on my lap. So that's a couple of the cute guys having dinner. They are super, super intelligent. Oh, sorry. I thought that was on the video. That's me. That's my shut up thing. Anyway, a few more things, and then I'll let you ask questions. Yeah, I had this veterinarian who'd been looking after the bat for a couple of days, and then sent it through to me, and she said to me on the phone, "You need to know how to feed him. He doesn't like to eat a whole mealworm. You need to cut its head off and squeeze the insides out, and he likes to sit just like this, otherwise he won't eat." And I said to her, "Thank you very much. I have fed a few bats in my time. It's all right. I'll look after him. Don't worry." And when he arrived, he said, "No, I don't eat like that. I like to sit like this." And I very quickly said to him, "No, it doesn't happen like that around here." And he said, "Oh, all right. If that's the way you're going to be, I'll just eat them." And that's how they are. They will literally train you. They'll teach you games. And we had one group that decided for some reason that I had to call each one individually for their food. So I'd have to use its name and call it, and it would come running out the enclosure, grab a mealworm, run back in, and I'd have to call the next one by name. And they'll teach you these games. They're super intelligent, and when they end up in a rehab situation, they're caged in a small cage, and they're going like, "Well, what do we do next? Well, let's see if we can train her." They are really, really super intelligent. They are such gentle animals. having worked with wildlife, if you pick up a wild squirrel, it'll bite you. If you pick up a wild bat, it just says, hi, you're going to help me. They really are. They're so sweet. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to you for your time tonight. And I hope I've shown you a different side to bats, as well as how magnificent they are, and that we can do our part to help protect them. Because there are not a lot of people rooting for bats. There really aren't. And they get slaughtered for roof roosting. And on top of that, they have to deal with our pesticides and our wind farms and everything else. And it doesn't take a lot to do things the right way and just not harm them. I think that's the big thing. Let's not harm them, because it's not necessary. Thank you very much. I believe we're going to take some questions.
Everyone, so much. A massive thank you to you. You blew my mind. I did not know bats were faster than peregrines. Don't even be devastated. And motheries and the bat kids and aerial mating, mohai. My mind is blown. And you're such a good speaker, and you came all the way from Perth. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you guys all for coming out. A big thank you to Painted Dog TV at the back for filming every month. You guys are amazing, and for making it available to a wider audience who can't make it in person. And of course to Thirsty Giraffe, who are absolutely amazing for hosting us. I'll hand the microphone back to you. Just a reminder, after questions are done, if we can all please clear out for 5 or 10 minutes, just to give Thirsty's chance to rearrange the table so we can all have our dinner. But if you can repeat the questions after they've said.
I will do.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Yes.
What age do they reach sexual maturity?
The question is, what age do bats reach sexual maturity? And it depends on the species. Some after their first year, very few will breed in the same year as they're born. In fact, I don't know of any offhand, but possibly some of the females might get knocked up if they're born early in the season, or if they're born early in the breeding season, and they've sort of got a 6 to 9 month window before winter hits, then they might get knocked up, but that's unusual. So typically after they're a year or two old, some as long as 5 years to reach sexual maturity.
I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, can I bring my kids to see your bats?
Okay.
Is that
Second question.
Second question is, I bought a bat box for my husband for his birthday, and I don't think
Okay. All right. First question was, can they bring the kids to visit our facility? Unfortunately not. We're a closed facility. We don't allow the public in. We've got wild animals. They are stressed. They don't take people walking through very well. As well as it can tame down some of our other animals. Bats are very different. Bats never get confused. They know they're not humans. They don't come to humans, even those that are hand raised. They will come to whoever raised them, but they won't land on us or anything. They'll simply fly past. It's kind of like, hi Ma, look, I'm flying. But other things like birds and squirrels can get very tame very quickly and actually just be a pain and go to strange people. So for that reason, our facility is closed for the benefit of the animals. As far as the bat box goes, it can take up to 3 years to get occupancy in a bat house. Bats are typically very roost loyal, so freetails in particular will have one roost, and that's where they live, full stop. Some of the evening bats, like the house bats and the pipistrelle bats, they can have several roosts and they move between them. And sometimes what will happen is the colony will actually have be split amongst several roosts, and the bats will move between the roosts with their buddies. And the colony is actually spread across several roosts. That's the evening bats. The freetails will have one place typically that they sleep, but it might also be like in the roof of your main house and then in the roof of your garage as well. That can either be 2 colonies or one. So with a bat house, you're actually hoping for some bats that have nowhere to stay. And if you keep it up, you generally will get bats in it, but it can take 3 years. What you also want is here in Rietspruit, Palabora, this sort of area, it's very hot. So if your bat house gets a bit of shade for some of the day, it's not a problem. But in other places, you do want afternoon sun to warm the bat house up, because that allows the bats to warm up. Bats are able to torpor. Our bats in South Africa don't hibernate. Some of them overseas hibernate. Ours torpor. So they lower their body temperature to the ambient temperature. So if it's 15 degrees, they make the body temperature 15 degrees. They slow down their heart rate, slow down their breathing, and that allows them to conserve energy. And for that, some afternoon sun is great. It helps them warm up before they go out hunting. But here it's generally not necessary because it's warm wherever you are. But in other parts of the country, it does help them to get a bit of afternoon sun. They like the area around the bat house clear. So don't put it next to trees, don't put it in a tree. Put it on your house wall. If you do that, remember they're going to put guano underneath the bat house. Otherwise, put it in your garden on a pole. A nice gum pole, make sure it's nice and high. The bottom of the bat house needs to be at least 2 meters off the ground for them to be pleased with it. It must also not leak, mustn't get drafty. They're quite fussy of bats.
Do you advise this? Can I call you in to advise on my patients?
Yes, yes. Yeah, you can give us a shout if you've got a bat house. Take a photograph of where you've got it up, send it to us and say, does this look good? What do you think? Should I move it somewhere else? Because sometimes you can have a bat house up for a while and there's just nobody moving in. Sometimes it's an idea just to move it somewhere else and see if they like it. Yeah.
What would be a natural roost for them? If they're going to be
Natural
in the
roost.
building, or if they're going to be...
Okay, natural roost for bats. Hollows of trees. Some species will actually roost hanging from trees, but most of them they're looking for hollows in trees, like flakes of rock that have come loose that give them a crevice in rocky areas, in between rocks, in caves, etc. Obviously we've got all the nice man-made structures. They're like culverts and roofs and those sort of things, expansion joints on bridges. But yeah, they're natural roosts, basically hollows and caves. Yes.
I think I read somewhere that sun parks are talking about taking a lot of the bat houses away
Yes.
from some of the parks in Kruger.
Yeah.
Is that going to be counterproductive?
Yes. Okay, the question is, the Kruger Park is talking about taking down their bat houses to reduce their bat problem. We do bat exclusions. We get bats out of buildings and we put up bat houses for them. We have buildings that we've done exclusions from years ago, and the bats are living in the bat houses. They're not in the buildings. Kruger's theory is their bat houses are full, so the bats are moving from the bat houses to the buildings. Now, bat houses versus buildings. If I put a Wendy house up in your garden, you're not going to move into it and leave your house. That's pretty much how bats see bat houses. Your house is nicer than a bat house. There are a few exceptions. We have had a few cases where the bats have left the roof and moved into the bat house. And for those people, I do recommend that they get their roof seen to. It's either leaking or it's drafty or something. But typically, they will choose the roof over a bat house. So for Kruger to say that their bat houses are full, and that's why they have bats in the accommodation, is crazy. They put up the bat houses because they had bats in the accommodation. That's why they put up the bat houses. This has been a long time coming. We have offered to train them to do proper bat exclusions so that they can fix their problem once and for all and stop harassing the bats. They've declined our offer to help because they say they know what they're doing. As you saw, that bat was stuck in the wire mesh, died with it, trying to chew out. So that they can then come back to me and say that they know what they're doing, I find very distressing. Lower Sabi Camp alone has over 40 bat houses, and the bats are also in the accommodation. So my question is, what are you going to do with all those bats? Because when you take those bat houses down, the bats will move into the accommodation. Parks say that they are covering the bat houses with shade netting and moving them with a forklift to somewhere else, far away. These bats fly at we haven't measured our bats, but probably pretty darn close to 160 k's an hour. They're going to be back in the camp before the park staff are back. if they think they're staying out there, I've got another thing coming for them. That's the rest of their friends are in the camp. They're unlikely to stay out in the bush somewhere. And even if they do, to take the bat houses away and think that's going to solve the bats and the roofs and the accommodation makes no sense. We recommended to parks that leave your bat houses, let's exclude your bats from the buildings and get them out, because it's a genuine problem for them. The guests are coming, they're coming into the accommodation, it smells, there's bat guano in the beds, there's bat guano on the countertops, guests are having to sleep with a sheet over their head so that they don't end up with bat guano in their mouth or something while they're snoring on their back. These are genuine. These are the things that their tourists are saying, and then they're demanding refunds. Understandably, I mean, they're paying a lot of money to stay there. But the problem is not the bat houses. So why on earth they want to take down bat houses without sorting out their accommodation is beyond me. Their statement was they were taking down the bat houses, then they'll figure out what to do with the accommodation. It's absolutely beyond me. I don't know what they're doing and I don't know why they're doing it. But I find it very distressing.
Besides humans, what are the natural predators?
Natural predators for bats. Raptors can be a bit of a problem. Most of them aren't quick enough to catch the adult bats. There is one bird that we have here, the bat hawk, as he's named. That's his forte. And obviously when you've got 1,000 bats all leaving from the same spot, it's a good place to sit and watch for them. And other natural predators are snakes. That's a big one for the bats. Even in roofs, the snakes get into the roofs. But that's typically it. They don't have a lot of predators. They outfly most of the birds. But if they end up on the ground, some bats can't take off from the ground, and then anything will eat them, a drongo, a hornbill, absolutely any of our birds will just pick them off the ground. So, yeah.
A question there and one on the left as well.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see you behind the light.
On the bat houses, we've got a roll-up awning. And
Okay.
they move in there. So we bought them a bat house. Because
Yeah.
I don't mind them in the awning, but every time you open the awning,
They all
you're
fall down.
obviously disturbing them.
Yeah.
Can you take them off the awning and put them in the bat house to encourage them to find it?
Okay, the question was, she has bats living in her awning. And they love awnings and umbrellas. This is the pipistrelle bats. That's who you'll have in your awnings. They love them. But the problem is very often they're torpouring during the day, and you'll unroll your awning or open your umbrella and all the bats fall out. If that does happen, just put them in a box for the day with a folded up cloth. They'll hide in the cloth, and in the evening you can just let them go, and they'll go back into your awning. She's asking they will. She's asking if they get them a bat house, can they put them in the bat house and see if they won't learn to live there? They probably won't. They're probably going to keep hanging out with your awning. What you can do with them is, if you open your awning and they all fall out, pick them up, put them in a box, let them go in the evening, leave your awning open for a while. Same thing with umbrellas. If you've got problems with them roosting in the umbrella, and just open your umbrella, pick them all up, let them go in the evening, leave your umbrella up for a while. And that'll get them going to find somewhere else. You've got the bat house, have it up. They might decide to give it a try when they don't have an awning. Yeah, but if you leave them with the awning as an option, they'll use the awning. Yeah.
There's two people on the left.
Okay. Yes.
How many bats can one bat house sustain? So if you've got like loads of bats, how many bat houses should you have for however quantity of bats you have?
Okay. The question was how many bats fit in a bat house. It depends on the size of the bat house. And we have smaller bat houses that will probably fit about 100 bats in it. We have bigger ones that will fit about 500, and then we do larger ones for farmers, etc., where you can really pack a hell of a lot in. They don't take a lot of space, the bats. To give you an idea, I've got little pouches like this, and we'll quite happily have 20 bats sleep in there together. So they really pack themselves in. The free-tailed bats, which is typically who you have around here, actually sort of stack themselves. a bit like, you know, the game Solitaire where you put all the cards on top of each other, they stack themselves like cards. And they lie like that. I think sometimes some of the bats are quite keen on lying in where they are, and others, I've seen bats hold other bats in place so that they can rest on them. They can be quite wicked. Yes?
Thanks. I heard over the weekend that a guy in the glacier, and he was talking about the glacier as well as sandbox. They're saying that they're removing bat houses out of their tourist houses. Because the bat houses are obviously attracting bats, which is fantastic. But then the overflow from the full bat houses leak into the house. So what's the solution?
Okay, I did just answer that question.
Sorry.
Maybe watch the video.
So there's like ultrasound bat control. What's your opinion about them?
Okay. The ultrasound bat control. They have looked at it. A lot of bat people have looked at it. We've tried it. Our bats ignored it completely and stayed in the roof. We moved it here, we moved it there, and the bats didn't move anywhere. But I have had some people say they've had great success with it. Yeah. If it works, great. I know people that have put lights up in their roofs as well, and that also chases the bat out. If you're going to use something like lights or these ultrasound devices, make sure you're not doing it in the breeding season. You don't want to set up a situation where the bats now flee and all the babies are left behind. They are good mothers, but if it does work on them, like I say, a lot of the bat conservation organizations don't recommend them. They say they haven't had good success. But yeah, I think it possibly depends on species and depends on what frequency the unit that you're using has. Just on the bats in Kruger, it is a case of the bat houses were put up because the bats were in the accommodation. That's why they put them up. They take them down, more bats are going in their accommodation. The bat houses are not the problem. Right.
There's one last question over here.
Yes.
So what can we do to stop Kruger from killing bats?
What can we do to stop? What can we do about Kruger? Yeah. She was asking, what do we do to stop Kruger from killing bats? We haven't dropped the conversation with them. We have been in conversation with them. Like I said, they're not interested in our help, unfortunately. We do have international organizations that are also very, very concerned about what's happening. It's a lot of bats in Kruger. We're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, because what they're doing in Low Sabi, they want to do in every one of their camps. And I'm very concerned because as much as they say they know what they're doing, that's not what I'm seeing. So yeah, there are a lot of people involved, both local bat conservation organizations and international bat conservation organizations. Please follow us on Facebook, etc. If we need petition signers and people to get involved, we will put it out there. Right now we're still busy talking with everybody as to how best we deal with Kruger and what they're doing with the bats. And it's very sad. I mean, they're there to protect our wildlife. So we're very shocked. But thank you. Right. All yours.